Number 10. Venom Clint Barton. Hawkeye. The Venom symbiote gets around, but Eddie will always be its true love. This venomized Hawkeye does not come from the Venomverse storyline. Surprise. In this world, Clint was possessed by the symbiote after Mac Gargan, aka the Scorpion, who was rocking it during his tenure on the Dark Avengers. He exists in a reality known as the War Zone, one of the remnants of realities left after the Secret Wars in 2015. This one is an alternate Earth in which the first Civil War, because yes, at this time there is more than one, there's two, after the first and better but still a hot mess Civil War, never ended. Instead, the country was divided into two sections, one ruled by Tony called the Iron and the other by Cap called the Blue. So Venom Clint was recruited by Spidey to infiltrate the Iron, which he agreed to for revenge, a dish best served through secret stealth operations. Why revenge? Not fully explained, but that's fine. So with this you have the symbiote's abilities, which of course include the heightened senses and strength, the augmentation of adrenaline and healing factor, the creation/manifestations of one's violent creations or thoughts, on top of Hawkeye's marksmanship, and in this universe, his rage. The symbiote does well when bonded to someone with anger issues. I guess there are so many Clintar now I can't just say the symbiote, but I'll always think of Venom first. Number 9. Jewel from Earth 523002. So Jewel is Jessica Jones, a character introduced in Alias, the first outing of the Max Marvel Comics imprint, a place where more adult and brutal stories could be told. In her original arc, Jessica had barely begun her superhero career when she is waylaid by the Purple Man, who takes her as his mind-controlled slave. Until tiring of her, he sicks her on the Avengers, who she attacks in a brainwashed rage, so they brutally beat her into a coma. Upon being aided into wakefulness by Jean Grey, in the original arc she retires for a time to be a private detective, and spends years sorting through her pain, trauma, and complicated relationship with her abilities. But of course, this is Marvel, so we have what ifs. This what if from 2005 is called What If Jessica Jones Had Joined the Avengers. In this universe, after awakening from her coma and being offered a "we're sorry we beat you nearly to death" spot on the team, she accepts. I'm telling you, they're just offering it out to everybody. She starts her career as an Avenger, and eventually starts a relationship with and marries Captain America. This Avengers team thus gets a strong new member, one ready to fight, with all of Jessica's latent abilities, super strength, flight, durability, and thanks to Jean, telepathic resistance to help her resist the Purple Man in the future. She's low, cause in the superhero world that's a pretty standard power set. Plus in the main verse she joins the Avengers later anyways. Number 8. Iron Patriot, Tony Stark, not Norman Osborn from Contest of Champions. This version of Tony is so twisted, I kinda love it. So for this we need to go back to the Illuminati, the superhero team determined to preemptively protect the universe from threats, and Reed's on the team, so you know it can come to no good. In their quest to keep people safe, they hunt down the Infinity Stones to form the Gauntlet, and Reed tried to wish them out of existence. However, the Watcher shows up to tell them that that isn't actually possible, as the universe needs the stones to exist. So instead the stones are divided amongst the members of the Illuminati. Tony gets the Reality Stone, and this reality he uses it, and begins subtly shifting reality during Civil War in his favor. He saved Steve though, so yay! But he made himself president. Under his tenure he created the Mighty Avengers, and functions as their leader, the Iron Patriot. Through some Battle Realm Maestro Hulk shenanigans, he is separated from his Reality Stone, but with it, in his home universe, he was a force to be reckoned with. The stones are meant to tempt their users, and this Tony just couldn't resist the pull. The power to do whatever one wants. Good stuff. Good stuff. Number 7. Wanda Maximoff from Earth 10082. Famine in this universe. In this universe, the Scarlet Witch has been turned into one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, specifically Famine. Her fellow horsemen in this universe were Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Red Hulk. They appeared as part of the Heroic Age event, and were really just there for a bit of shock, especially for Spider-Man, who was all, "Oh, me, a horseman of the apocalypse? How could this be?" Still, the idea of Scarlet Witch with all of her destructive reality warping, or in some cases destroying powers, combined with augmented powers of one of Apocalypse's horsemen, people would be dropping dead on the spot. But the Avengers still defeat them, cause heroes. Avengers assemble! Number 6. Thunderstrike, Eric Masterson. Now I can see some of your feathers getting ruffled, but stay with me a moment. Eric Masterson is one of the many other characters to take on the mantle of Thor. However, initially when this character appeared, he was Thor. The two were fused together. In fact, it was kind of awful for Eric, because both of their personalities were in there, like an angry thunderous firestorm. However, the two were separated after Thor killed Loki, and was banished. But he begged for Eric, who he had become fond of, to not be left defenseless, especially not after having been Thor. So Heimdall causes Eric to become the new Thor, with all the Thunder God's powers, but this time with his own mind, 100%. He very quickly after, due to fans', let's say, feedback, became Thunderstrike, his own character, but still Thor. with an axe called Thunderstrike. So he's named after his weapon, basically. Still, it's a solid weapon name. However, for his time as Thor, he was an Avenger with all of Thor's powers, but he was only kinda Thor. Feeling my reach? Put some stretch into it. He did better on his own. I know some of you were mad he was on my worst Avengers list. I still maintain he was better being a secret defender with Rhodey. Yes, you can be strong, and I still want you solo. Bow to my whims. Number 5. The MCU's Avengers. They get a mention mid-ranked. I know some don't consider them alternates, but well, they are. The main verse is 616. Everyone else just wishes they were. Well, not really. Some people have way better alternate realities. This team has been one followed by the public, and for some is who they think of when they think of the Avengers. They came together to defeat Thanos and solve their version of the Infinity Gauntlet arc, bringing back half of the universe, even after being torn apart by Civil War. Impressive, and a cinematic event to behold. Number 4. Natalia Romanova, the Iron Spider of Earth TRN 619. So she's a member of President Stark's Mighty Avengers, and had a similar history to her 616 counterpart, until things were altered by Tony using the Reality Stone. When Tony picked her to be a member of his team, he gave her the Iron Spider armor. So we have Natasha with all of her training and ruthlessness, with an Iron Spider suit, cause well, Spider-Man is on the other side. So she gets all the perks that armor has to bring, which is a lot. And she gets to look good doing it. Man, Tony and Pierre's relationship was really messed up by Civil War. Can you imagine now he sees Black Widow in his old armor? Just, well, it's on. Or it would be if this universe hadn't come to an end. Number 3. Vampire Avengers. Gotta love a whole team of vampires. Well, you don't, but I do. These Avengers come from Earth 3931, and were all turned by Captain America, who was turned by Baron Blood. In fact, he got turned all the way back during World War II. His Avengers are all his personal slaves. Some people retain their sense of self after they turn, and some people just go full scorched earth. This team went up against the Exiles, and it did not go well. Still, this Cap had his serumness plus an additional vampire boost on top. The strength, the mesmerization, the teleportation, he was stacked. It would be nice to see Vamp Cap again. He's like Cap Wolf for me, just more supernatural Steve Rogers. Transformation on top of transformation. Number 2. Let's stay in the same vein with the Undead Avengers. Yes, there are different types of undead. It encompasses a wide breadth of creatures. These Avengers come from Earth 666. Cute. They've got Frankencastle, which I maintain still sounds like a cereal. So not much is known about this Earth, except that it's made up of supernatural creatures, and the societal structure is based around all these subgroups. And the best of each group united to form these Avengers, as a representation that all these groups could work together and protect this supernatural Earth. Inspiring. And come on, you know a hero team featuring vampires, werewolves, zombies, witches, etc. has got to be awesome. All the bonus damage they can take. And wreak. I mean, are they good? I don't know. Number 1. Rogue Danvers. This is actually 2 characters, let me explain. So this Rogue was Carol Danvers, and still kinda is. This character hails from Earth 9289, which was briefly visited by the mainverse Captain Marvel. In this universe, the transference of power between her and Rogue went differently. In this world, Rogue held on too long. Well, too long comparatively, and ended up absorbing more than Carol's power, i.e. strength, flight, etc., her memories, and her personality. In fact, she held on so long that Carol did too. It went both ways, and instead of slipping into a coma like she did in the 616 verse, she absorbed Rogue's powers and personality. So in essence, they swapped. So Carol is Rogue and Rogue is Carol. So I'm counting both. We have a nerfed up Captain Marvel post-binary except and Rogue. That's a lot of a lot. Cosmic absorption power. The main verse Carol encounters these two while peering across the multiverse to encounter other versions of herself with the Reality Stone during Infinity Countdown Captain Marvel. That's a mouthful.
In at number 10, Henry Pym. Henry Pym of Earth 12091 is a literal humanoid ant. Pym was a member of the Avengers Federation, an Avengers team that appears in Space Punisher issue 4, which was released back in 2012. He differs from his 616 counterpart mainly due to his physical appearance, if that wasn't obvious. The character has 3 talons on each hand, 2 talons on each foot, and an insect head with antennae and 4 insect arms. Now aside from having the same abilities as Henry Pym, and this new bug body upgrade, not much else is known about this Ant-Man, aside from the fact that he was trying to stop the Kree-Skrull War by eliminating both sides with his fellow Avengers members. Moving on to number 9, Anti-Vision. Anti-Vision from Earth 932 is an evil version of Vision who was a member of the Gatherers, sent to infiltrate the Avengers. He possesses all of the same abilities as Vision, and ultimately meets his end when the Protector cuts him in half for betraying him, something Anti-Vision had done in an attempt to save his own butt. But what makes this version of Vision more deadly? Well, he shows more of a range of emotion than the regular 616 Vision does, especially especially when it comes to cruelty, with him depicting more delinquent behavior and enjoying causing others pain. Sadist much? And at number 8, the Infernal Hulk. This version of the Hulk came from Earth 11638, in which Bruce Banner was the Sorcerer Supreme of that Earth. Banner separated himself from the Hulk, banishing his monstrous half to hell. In doing so, the Hulk became the Infernal Hulk, a stronger, more demonic version of the character, who eventually broke out of hell. Banner had to come up with a plan alongside Spider-Man and Deadpool, and reversed his banishing spell on the Hulk, recombining himself and the Infernal Hulk together, with Banner's neck then being snapped in sacrifice in order to keep the Infernal Hulk from ever taking control of his body and breaking free. Up next, number 7, Ghost Spider. Ghost Spider is the Peter Parker of Earth 11638, an Earth where Uncle Ben never died and actually aided Peter with his superpowers. And Peter created a company called Parker Technologies, which made him super rich. Operating under the mantle of Amazing Spider, he ended up dying, and Bruce Banner, the Sorcerer Supreme from our last number, because this takes place on the same Earth, would strike a deal with him after Banner had gone to hell with his angrier half. Parker was freed, infused with the spirits and powers of the repentant damned, turning him into an amalgamation of Ghost Rider and Spider-Man, known as Ghost Spider. His abilities were a combination of both the Web Slingers and Jonathan Blazes from Earth 616. And at number 6, the Dark Avengers. Let's talk about an alternate version of the Avengers, as in the whole team, that appeared on Earth 616 since 2009. The Dark Avengers. The first iteration of the Dark Avengers was assembled by Norman Osborn, who at that point was an anti-hero of sorts. The first group included Sentry, Ares, Novar, Mac Gargan's Venom, Moonstone, who portrayed Miss Marvel, Bullseye, who was portraying Hawkeye, and Daken, Wolverine's son, who operated under his father's mantle. Osborn led the team as Iron Patriot. Hawkeye, as his Ronin persona, then goes public on television declaring Osborn a threat, reminding everyone of his murderous past, in case y'all forgot, which only begins a series of unfortunate events for the team leader, who later finds himself manipulated by Loki, relapsing into his Green Goblin persona, and declaring war on the Asgardians. Talk about a relapse. A second iteration of the team post the Fear Itself story event was made up of another group of characters who portrayed Avengers members. Tommy Shishido was the Wolverine of the group, Scar, Hulk's son, fit into the role of his father, and Ragnarok took on Thor's role, to name a few. Moving on to number 5, Iron Hammer. Recently, Marvel released a story arc known as Infinity Warps. It was a story in which Gamora had possession of the Infinity Stones and folded the Marvel Universe in half inside of the Soul Gem, which combined different characters' personas into one, leading to a bunch of mashups of Marvel characters. This one is the combination of Thor and Tony Stark's Iron Man, called Stark Odin's Son, in which Tony was the son of the chieftain executive of Asgard. Due to his arrogance and vanity, Stark was stripped of his godhood until he learned the pain and loss of being human. Stark would awake on Earth with no memory of his past, but then use his genius-level intellect to build up a tech industrial company, creating himself a suit of armor when he was captured and kept prisoner by Dark Elves. See what they did there? They're just taking all the things and mashing it together. And at 4, Thor-El from Earth 9602. Back in the 90s, DC Comics came together with Marvel to create the Amalgam Universe, a universe in which the characters of DC and Marvel universes were amalgamated. In it, we were introduced to the combination of Thor and DC's Man of Steel, Superman, creating Thor-El. While he didn't get a whole lot of panel time and the character's true extent of his powers were never fully explored, he was considered to be the Kryptonian Thunder God, wielding an energy mallet along with having the combined powers of Thor and Superman, or rather, the blue energy of Superman. His one weakness is Noranite, similar to Kryptonite. Moving on to number 3, Weapon Hex. Weapon Hex is the Infinity Warp version of X-23 Laura Kinney and Wanda Maximoff's Scarlet Witch. And just like the other Infinity Warps amalgamations, Weapon Hex has all the same powers as Laura and Wanda combined, meaning she's got magical reality warping abilities, meets the claws and healing factors and adamantium skeleton of X-23. Her history is similar to X-23's, having been an experiment that was raised by scientist Sarah Kinney, except this time, rather than it be a part of the Weapon X program, Sarah was part of an occult scientific sect known as the Evolutionaries. She would later become a member of the Defenders alongside other warped heroes. Speaking of, in at number 2, Soldier Supreme. The last of the Infinity Warps combos on our list. Here we have the amalgamation of Sorcerer Supreme Dr. Stephen Strange and America's most patriotic hero, Steve Rogers. Soldier Supreme's story begins during World War II, with the Super Soldier Serum being a cover for mystical rituals which give Stephen Rogers his strength and physicality, all while giving him the magical abilities of Strange and access to powerful sorcery. He would go on to fight Dormammu Red, the combination of Dormammu and Red Skull, only to be banished to the Dark Dimension for years. Rogers would live there before finding a way out when a satanic cult opened up a portal to their world. Is that worse than being frozen alive? I think it might actually be. Fighting demons all the time? And finally, in at 1, Zombie Hulk. While Zombie Hulk might not be the first alternate to come to mind when you think of the strongest alternates in the multiverse, he's a character who managed to get himself the power cosmic, all thanks to mowing down on the Silver Surfer. So let's backtrack here for a second. Zombie Hulk, aka Bruce Banner of Earth 2149, was infected by the zombie plague after Nick Fury requested his help in trying to resist against it. That clearly did not work out too well, and after he became a zombie, he went around chewing down on a bunch of different characters on Earth 2149. Alongside Wolverine, Iron Man, Power Man, Spider-Man, and Giant Man, he ate Silver Surfer and later Galactus, making him into one of the zombie Galacti. This means he has the power to absorb and tap into ambient cosmic energy. While we never see him use the full extent of his abilities granted thanks to the power cosmic, he does end up smashing Thanos' head in with his bare hands. Something he does because the Mad Titan calls him out for eating more than his share. In at number 10, Marvel 1602's Black Widow. Out of all of our scary alternates on this list, this version of Black Widow is perhaps the most tame. But why is she terrifying? It's because she uses her skills and abilities for some straight up evil stuff. This Natasha is from Earth 311 from Marvel 1602, a world in which she's a freelance spy and is considered the most dangerous woman in all of Europe. From Neil Gaiman and Andy Kubert, the Marvel 1602 series is an alternate reality in which we see our favorite Marvel characters operating during the year 1602 in Europe. The world is very much like it is on Earth 616 in that time period as well. Now, Natasha had previously worked alongside Matthew Murdock, but then betrayed him for Count Otto von Doom. Otto Octavius and Victor von Doom smoked together. She ended up becoming the villain's lover. She worked with him during the kidnapping of William Shakespeare, serving as the captain of his flying ship, up until she started questioning his authority and his plans, which resulted in him pushing her over the side of the ship to her death. What a way to go. Up next, number 9, Age of X Steve Rogers from Earth 11326. Here we have a version of Steve Rogers who's all for the killing and hunting of mutants, or at least he was in the beginning. As the leader of the Avengers, it was his job to hunt mutants down. During one mission in particular, he ends up giving into his bloodlust and kills Mystique, justifying her death as the right thing to do, because she was dangerous. That's when he discovers that she was actually protecting a group of mutant children. Steel Corpse, who is the alternative Tony Stark on that Earth, suffers from an emergency override with his armor and attempts to kill the children anyway, triggering the man inside the suit to inform Rogers to not save him but to save the kids instead. Steve ends up shooting him in the back of his head. This Steve is then killed while battling the Hulk, with Legacy then absorbing his memories as a way of saying thank you for changing his ways and attempting to help mutants in the end. He turns out for the better, but I guess, bloodlust is still pretty scary, right? Moving on to number 8, Hawkeye of Earth 11223. This version of Hawkeye is a product of the What If Dark Reign title from issue 1, volume 1. In this story, set on Earth 11223, Clint is a member of the Avengers, as per usual. The team goes after the X-Men, believing they are involved in the deaths of Tony Stark and Beast. That's when Hawkeye pretty much gets his butt handed to him by Sabretooth. Ultimately, his life is spared by the mutants, but it only gets more tragic for the sharpshooter from there on out. He heads back to the Avengers mansion only to witness it getting completely destroyed, with all of the remaining Avengers being killed in the process. So Hawkeye takes matters into his own hands and seeks out the culprit, Norman Osborn, believing that he doesn't deserve to live, and that killing him is the only way to end his reign of terror. Dark Hawkeye. And at number 7, Venom Thor from Earth 1089. This alternative Thor comes from What If Volume 2, Issue 4, in a story called What If the Alien Costume Had Possessed Spider-Man. The alien costume it's referring to is Venom prior to the character coming into his full-fledged Eddie Brock hosted glory. In this hypothetical tale, Peter Parker doesn't seek out the help of Reed Richards like he does on the 616 Earth. Instead, the Venom symbiote stays bonded to Parker until he begins to sniff out some stronger potential hosts, having used up all of Parker's adrenaline in the process. Now initially, the Venom symbiote jumps to the Hulk, but when he sets eyes on Thor, he ditches Hulk and heads over to the Asgardian god. Thor's tenure as Venom is brief, with Reed Richards employing the help of Black Bolt to use his sonic scream to separate Thor from Venom before the two are permanently bonded. But in the process, Black Bolt does destroy Mount Rushmore. But hey, at least Thor ends up getting free of the symbiote. That's at least good, right? I mean, it's only Mount Rushmore. In at number 6, the Ultimate Black Widow. This version of Black Widow is notably worse than the one we mentioned previously. I mean, she is, higher up on the list, so kind of a given. The Ultimate 1610 universe in general gives us a grim take on beloved Marvel characters, exploring different aspects of their character personality traits that were never ventured into in the 616 universe. This Black Widow is a prime example of that. Her origin story is similar to her 616 beginnings, but the reason she's called Black Widow is thanks to a reputation she's cultivated by killing her husbands, marrying frequently, and then assassinating them. Or rather, they would end up suffering from unfortunate accidents. She eventually defected from the KGB to the US and joined S.H.I.E.L.D. She would later marry Tony Stark, who gave her an all-black suit of Iron Man armor and a set of of nanites that bonded to her skin in order to control the suit, all as an engagement present. But now here's where it gets awkward for Tony. Turns out Natasha is a traitor and reveals the identity of the Hulk, frames Captain America and Thor, and then aids the Liberators with their invasion of the US, all as a way to seek revenge for Russia, believing that the US made her country into a bankrupt nation of hookers and gangsters. She then kills Jarvis, holds Tony hostage in an attempt to extort him of his fortune, but then Tony uses the nanites in her body to freeze her in place, knocks her unconscious with a wine bottle, giving her brain damage. And then, when she's hospitalized, Hawkeye comes after her, shooting her in the head with one of his arrows, all because she was partially responsible for his family's death. Talk about dark. Up next at 5, Herald of Galactus Thor from Earth 717. Here we have another what if story concerning Thor, from Volume 1 of What If Thor Issue 1. This Thor appears in a story called What If Thor Was the Herald of Galactus. It's a bleak tale in which Thor, upon Galactus' arrival at Asgard, realizes that fighting against the Devourer of Worlds is futile, and ends up striking a deal with the cosmic entity instead. Leave Asgard alone and he would become Galactus' herald. He goes around informing the inhabitants of various planets that Galactus has chosen their worlds to satiate his appetite, and that their homes could not be spared. Destruction was inevitable. Eventually though, Thor ends up returning to his home on Asgard briefly, only to discover that his father Odin has been killed by Loki, and the trickster god has imprisoned all of his pals. So Thor rescues those remaining alive, sends them to Earth, and then brings Galactus to Asgard to consume it. Up next at 4, Vampire Captain America from 3931. Cap has a history of transforming into supernatural beings. Cap Wolf, anybody? This time around though, this Steve Rogers from Earth 3931 is a different horror movie being. He's a vampire. On this Earth, Steve was infected with vampirism during World War II by Baron Blood, who on this Earth is actually a vampire badass humanoid creature. After being bitten, Rogers develops new powers and ends up infecting the rest of the Avengers team, making them his personal slaves. The Exiles would encounter him when trying to fix his world, and eventually Rogers was decapitated, but that was not the end of him. He ends up surviving and reattaches his head to his body. From vampires to zombies, in at our next number we have Marvel Zombies Hawkeye from Earth 2149. We featured the zombie versions of the Avengers on our last list, but this time we're gonna get a bit more specific and look at one Avengers member in particular who has quite the compelling and eerie arc, Clint Barton of Earth 2149. Hawkeye's past is presumably the same as the 616 Hawkeye up until the zombie plague. When the Avengers attempted to stop the Sentry who had been infected, he bites all of them, overpowering them and infecting them. During the siege on Castle Doomstadt in Latveria, zombie Hawkeye is decapitated by Magneto. He uses Steve Rogers' shield to do so. Flash forward to 40 years later. T'Challa's grandson finds a very confused and incoherent head in the rubble of New York. Hawkeye is still alive but has gone insane thanks to, well, just being a head. He's taken back to T'Challa, who realizes that Hawkeye's hunger has dissipated and ends up giving him the Wasp's glass domed suit to use as a body. He's later killed by the Hulk, who smashes his head in, crushing it, killing him once and for all. In at number 2, Skeletal Peter Parker from Earth 9811. Shout out to Smasher for the suggestion for this number. So this version of Spider-Man comes from What If Volume 2, Issue 114 from 1998, Issue 114 from 1998, in a story called Brave New World. It's a different take on Secret Wars, with the participants of that story event being trapped on Battleworld, never returning to Earth. And it's 25 years after the Secret Wars event, the first one that is. They're forced to settle down, with many of the heroes and villains getting married and having kids. Now in the midst of all this, we see Spider-Man still wearing the black symbiote costume, aka Venom, something that he had had removed by Reed Richards after Secret Wars. But here's the kicker: because he never got the chance to get it removed, it permanently bonded to him, with the symbiote eventually consuming Peter's body entirely, leaving only a skeleton. At one point in the story, we see the symbiote jump off of Peter's skeleton when affected by a sonic attack, revealing that Parker has been dead for a very long time, and Venom has been running the show. Peter's mind hasn't totally been possessed by the symbiote though, which perhaps makes this even creepier. And finally, in at number 1, Dark Beast from Earth 295. While Beast is largely considered to be a member of the X-Men, it's not the only team in the comics that he was ever a part of. Once upon a time, he was a member of the Avengers too. He's also been a member of the Secret Avengers and the Defenders. He gets around a lot when it comes to superhero teams fighting for justice. But you know who doesn't? His dark counterpart, who hails from Earth 295, the Age of Apocalypse timeline, in which Charles Xavier was killed off, leading to Magneto leading the Resistance, and Apocalypse attacking sooner. Apocalypse manages to conquer North America because of it. So how does Xavier's absence turn Beast into a villain? Well, without Charles around, Beast's intelligence and desire for experimentation were unhindered by morals and ethics. He wasn't compassionate like his 616 counterpart, so he ends up becoming one of Apocalypse's chief scientists, who tortures and experiments on both humans and mutants unethically, including Cyclops and Jean Grey, which is how he ends up getting the nickname Beast, since he's so damn cruel and gruesome. He ends up escaping from that reality before it's blown to smithereens, coming to Earth 616. He then pretends to be 616 Hank McCoy, killing off the childhood friends of that Beast in order to cover his tracks, and eventually joins up with Onslaught. And at number 10, Ultimate's Hank Pym. Hank Pym of Earth 616 has had his fair share of scary moments, but nothing compares to his Earth 1610 Ultimate's counterpart, who is straight up villainous. While Pym's history of bad mental health related experiences are arguably no faults of his own in the main Marvel continuity, the actions of Ultimate Pym are rooted in jealousy and some serious anger issues. Pym was a mentally fragile scientist who was utterly brilliant, and gained his abilities after he experimented on the blood of his wife Janet, who was a mutant. The couple, already struggling in their marriage, join the Ultimates, and Janet befriends Captain America, who Hank gets irrationally jealous of. The two have a major physical fight, with Hank pushing Janet around, and then she shrinks down to her wasp size. He then gets bug spray and uses it on her, leading her to be hospitalized. Cap would then beat the crap out of Hank for it, kicking him off the team. Later during the Ultimatum storyline, Hank teams up with Hawkeye to find his estranged wife after Magneto flooded the eastern seaboard, and Janet went missing. When they do find her, Blob is eating her corpse. Hank loses it, grows in size, and then rips off the Blob's head with his teeth. Enough said. And at number 9, What If World War Hulk. The Hulk, thanks to his gamma radiation and his ability to grow in power the angrier he gets, is an Avengers member who often finds himself in darker alternate stories than his teammates. What If World War Hulk is the first of a handful of these on her list. Back in 2010, a What If story took the World War Hulk storyline from 2007 and adapted it into a hypothetical scenario. For context, World War Hulk was the story event that followed Planet Hulk, which followed the Hulk's narrative after he was banished from Earth by the Illuminati, spending time on Sakaar. World War Hulk follows him returning to Earth with the intent of getting revenge. This What If comic leads to a much darker ending than its namesake event, with Iron Man attempting to take Hulk out with a satellite weapon, except this time it ends up killing Sentry, Mr. Fantastic, and Iron Man himself. When Secret Invasion rolls around without these three heroes still alive, Earth ends up pretty screwed, with 80% of the population getting killed off. Hulk attempts to lead the Avengers, but a Skrull pretending to be the Wasp sets off a genetic time bomb during an Avengers meeting. It kills all of them except for Hulk. Hulk goes to extreme measures, asking Galactus to put a stop to the madness altogether by consuming the Earth and all the Skrulls within it. Hulk ends up becoming his new herald, known as the World Breaker. And at number 8, Hulk the End. Speaking of the Hulk, let's take a look at another alternate version of the big green monster, one that is just as depressing. The End was a series of comics from Marvel that explored a possible future timeline for several of their characters, including the Hulk. Not all of them are depressing as this one, to give them credit. Anywho, this one-shot comic features Bruce Banner and the Hulk as the only survivors of a nuclear holocaust. Banner, unable to die, walks the Earth alone in sorrow, whereas the Hulk is angry that he's forced to be alive with only Banner left on the planet with him. Banner's psyche slowly fades away as the Hulk wanders around, getting attacked by mutant cockroaches, slowly regenerating, and so on and so forth. A camera from an alien species known only as the Recorder in the comic watches him from afar, confirming that humankind has been eliminated. Banner watches some of the horrific things that the camera has caught the Hulk enduring and regenerating from. Eventually, Banner dies, and the Hulk finally gets to be alone at last, only to realize that he is in fact alone forever. See what I mean about depressing? And at number 7, Marvel Zombies. We're talking about all of the Avengers in at this number. Marvel Zombies came out in 2005 and depicted pretty much the entirety of the Marvel universe on Earth being either brutally murdered, consumed, or transforming into a zombie. It was intense. And of course, one half of the creative team behind it was Robert Kirkman. Anywho, after the zombified heroes and villains managed to eat their way through the rest of the living on Earth, some of them managed to gain some cosmic powers thanks to the individuals they've consumed, and begin looking for more meals off planet. It's a little horrifying. And at 6, Iron Maniac. Iron Maniac is an evil version of Iron Man who hails from Earth 5012, first appearing in issue 2, volume 3 of Marvel Team Up. What's his deal? Well, on his Earth, the Avengers were mostly wiped out by an alien the name of Titanus. Reed Richards loses his crap, and thanks to an attack from the Human Torch, Iron Man is majorly scarred, causing him to adopt a suit of armor similar to Dr. Doom's. Iron Man decides to make it his mission to stop Reed Richards, who then banishes him to Earth 616. While there, Iron Maniac takes on the Fantastic Four and Dr. Doom, who all think he's a Doom imposter. When the war against Titanus doesn't break out and ruin 616 like it did in his world, Iron Maniac still goes after this Earth's heroes, deeming himself still as the sole survivor of a sane world living in a backwards, insane world. And at number 5, Ruins Hulk. Ruins is by far one of the most depressing and dark alternate reality stories in the Marvel multiverse. Written in 1995 by Warren Ellis, it's set in a dystopian version of the Marvel universe, and is a parody of the Marvels series, except notably more twisted. A reporter named Phil Sheldon explores the universe and sees how all of these superpowered individuals now suffer from a myriad of of deformities and painful deaths. We learn that Captain America was into cannibalism, that the destruction of the last Avengers Quinjet is what killed Cap, Iron Man, Giant Man, and Wasp, and that the Hulk, thanks to his exposure to gamma radiation, has turned into this, a giant monstrous green mass of pulsating tumors. It ain't pretty. This happened when Banner saved his pal Rick Jones from getting hit with the experimental gamma bomb, and instead of, becoming the full-fledged Hulk, he became this. It's no bueno. And at number 4, Fascist Vision. In this 1990s in the 1990s comic What If the Vision of the Avengers Conquer the World, issue 19 of the What If series, we see what the android would become if he were, well, a fascist. The story begins with Vision deciding that in order to achieve global order and any semblance of peace, he needs to implant himself within every single computer across the globe. As you can imagine, this doesn't go over well with humans. In the aftermath, New York City is nuked and Vision ends up becoming a supreme ruler of sorts over the planet, continuously being corrupted by all of his newfound power. He ends up taking his ambitions off planet too, seeking to control the Kree Empire, the Skrulls, and even the Badoon Empire. And at number 3, Hydra Cap. One of the more recent comic book controversies was found in the pages of Marvel's Captain America Steve Rogers comic, which led into the Secret Empire storyline of 2017. Long story short, it was revealed that Captain America had all along been a sleeper Hydra agent, helping lay the foundation for a global Hydra takeover. Cap literally said the words, "Hail Hydra," and comic book fans everywhere, along with like a chunk of the internet, freaked out. Cap, being a secret Nazi, went against everything that the character stood for, everything the character's historical context blossomed from. That's when Marvel pulled a Death of Superman-esque stunt and was like, hey guys, guess what? It isn't really the real Captain America who is a Nazi, it's one from an alternate reality. Here we have Steven Rogers of Earth 61311, the Captain America who was developed as a child to be a supporter of Hydra thanks to the living embodiment of the Cosmic Cube and Red Skull's influence. And at number 2, Hulk Future Imperfect. This version of the Hulk, also known as Maestro, comes from Earth 9200 and first appeared back in 1992. This Earth takes place around 100 years into the future, where a nuclear war has taken out most of the superpowered individuals, and the human race faces extinction. Maestro, affected by the radiation, mixed with holding a grudge against humanity for how he's been treated, ends up taking over the planet as its ruler. His strength has multiplied thanks to the new radiation he's absorbed, and he still maintains Banner's intelligence. The present-day Hulk from Earth 616 believes that the Maestro's insanity has also contributed to his increase in power. 616 Hulk has fought against him before and has been privy to many future versions of himself, even realizing when aspects of Maestro become apparent in his life, like when he enjoyed taking out his rivals and when he contemplated growing a beard. Yes, actually. And finally, in at number 1, Old Man Logan's Hulk. There are a lot of devastating interpretations of characters on Old Man Logan's Earth, Earth 807128. After the supervillains took over, Hulk, whom some believed had slowly started to go insane thanks to absorbing additional radiation from an atomic bomb that was dropped on California, joined in on the evil shenanigans. He took over California, renamed it Hulkland, and then shagged up with his first cousin She-Hulk in order to create a whole inbred family of little Hulks, which was then called the Hulk Gang. Wolverine owed Hulk a debt and came up short with his rent, so Banner sent his children to press Logan, who struck up a deal with them to be a bodyguard for Clint Barton. While Logan was away, Banner ordered that his family be killed regardless. Logan then sought out revenge, killing Banner's family one by one, and eventually went after Banner himself. Banner tells Logan that he was hoping he'd go wild, wanting a good fight like the old days, and wanted his Wolverine back. The two fight and Bruce transforms into the Hulk and eats Logan whole, who then claws his way out of the Hulk's stomach, killing. Starting us off in at number 10, War Machine. War Machine, aka James Rhodes, was one of the initial members of the Secret Avengers, but eventually was assigned as the government's own Iron Man due to a contract between Tony Stark's Stark Resilient Company and the Pentagon. He served as a lieutenant at the time. But let's jump back for a sec. James Rhodes first appeared in Iron Man issue 118 in 1979, but wouldn't suit up until a handful of years later in 1983 in Iron Man issue 170 when he donned the Iron Man mantle. He would eventually become War Machine in 1992 in Iron Man issue 282 after it was revealed that Tony Stark wasn't dead after all, and that he wanted Rhodey to have the variable threat response battlesuit, since it always kind of belonged to his pal anyway. His War Machine suit gives him the abilities similar to Stark's in his Iron Man suit, including superhuman strength, durability, supersonic flight, and the use of an energy repulsor and a variety of offensive and defensive weaponry at his disposal. Rhodes would rejoin the team as part of one of the Marvel Now recruits, but as Iron Patriot, leaving the team once again in Secret Avengers Volume 1 Issue 16. Moving on to number 9, the Human Human Torch. We're talking Jim Hammond here. The Human Torch, the android version of the character, is one of a handful of characters on this list that aren't one of the original Secret Avengers team members from the 2010 iteration. Hammond would become known as one of the Shattered Heroes recruits, who joined the team during Secret Avengers issue 22 in 2012. But Hammond's history goes way further back than that. A Golden Age hero, he was one of Timely Comics' signature characters, Timely being Marvel's predecessor. While the Johnny Storm version of the Human Torch would adapt Hammond's abilities, their origins couldn't be any more different. Hammond is an android created by Professor Phineas T. Horton. At his grand unveiling, the android burst into flames when exposed to oxygen, and was perceived to be a threat to the public. He was sealed in concrete as a safety measure, but the sentient robot broke free thanks to a crack that let oxygen seep through. He can manipulate fire, is resistant to it, can fly, and can survive without oxygen for long periods of time. Hammond would eventually depart from the team during Secret Avengers issue 37. Moving on to number 8, Moon Knight. Mark Spector was one of the original 9 teammates that made up the first iteration of the Secret Avengers. He's also one of their most intriguing members, being an expert detective often compared to Batman from DC Comics. Mark Spector was initially a boxer and US Marine, and is an expert in a variety of different forms of hand-to-hand combat including Judo, Kung Fu, and Muay Thai. He gained his superhuman powers from the Egyptian moon god Khonshu, giving him superhuman strength, endurance, and reflexes, all based on the phases of the moon. But those powers would be removed from the character in 2007 during his solo Midnight Sun arc, with Spector admitting that he lost them due to disobedience. Spector also has multiple personalities and is notoriously psychologically unstable. Spector would leave the Secret Avengers in issue 21. Up next, looking at the team leader himself, in at 7, Captain Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers is yet another one of Timely's staple trifecta, having been created in 1941 by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. Designed as a wartime patriotic super soldier, often fighting against the Axis powers of World War II, the character would fall into obscurity in 1950, showing up a few times and then later being revived in 1964, where he was thawed out of ice and became one of the Avengers. He has been on many a team in the past, most famously, obviously the Avengers, but has dabbled in other iterations, including the Secret Avengers. His strength comes from the super soldier serum, giving him peak human strength, speed, durability, agility, reflexes, senses, and an accelerated healing factor. In addition to that, he is a master tactician, strategist, and field commander, and definitely knows his way around hand-to-hand combat. Steve would leave the team in Secret Avengers issue 22, but eventually return to his position as the leader of the Avengers, resuming his role as Captain America. And fun fact, the costume that Cap wears in the MCU film Captain America the Winter Soldier was inspired by the super soldier costume that he wore in the first volume of Secret Avengers. Moving on to 6, Captain Britain. Here we have a member from the Shattered Heroes recruits. Captain Britain, aka Brian Braddock, found himself joining up in issue 22 of the first volume of Secret Avengers. Captain Britain first appeared in 1976's Captain Britain issue 1, a comic exclusively published in the UK by Marvel. He has superhuman strength, speed, endurance, agility, durability, reflexes, and senses. He can create force fields, energy beams, and he can even fly. His powers were initially thanks to a mystical amulet called the Amulet of Right, which Braddock would rub to transform into his superhero persona, but that would later change with his powers being tied to his emotions instead. Up next at 5, Agent Venom, aka Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson is yet another Shattered Heroes recruit. He is a character who has been around for quite some time, first appearing in Amazing Fantasy issue 15 in 1962 during Spider-Man's debut, as a school peer bully of Peter Parker's. He would eventually mature, becoming a close friend of Peter's, learning his secret identity, and eventually joining the US Army after he graduated college. He ended up losing both of his legs in the Iraq War, and turned to alcoholism to deal with his trauma. But eventually the military decided to enlist him again for other means. He would become Agent Venom, bonding with the Venom symbiote, allowing him to use his legs again, all while controlling Venom thanks to a cocktail of drugs. As Agent Venom, he can not only walk again, but he has superhuman strength, agility, reflexes, endurance, and can produce organic webbing. He has an immunity to spider sense, can shapeshift and camouflage to an extent, and can cling to almost any surface, creating his own armor and forming his own limbs. Thompson also left the Secret Avengers in issue 37. Up next at 4, Nova. Nova, the Richard Rider iteration, was a part of the original team of Secret Avengers, leaving during the events of issue 5 of the very first volume. Richard was technically first created by Marv Wolfman in his fanzine Super Adventures in 1966. He wouldn't become a part of the Marvel Universe until 1976 in a story called The Man Called Nova, issue 1. He was meant to be an homage to Spider-Man, but a more cosmic version. So what can Nova do? Well, he is capable of flight, he has superhuman strength, speed, and durability, and he can exert influence over gravitational forces. and even open up wormholes. He would also come into possession of the Xandarnian World Mind, which allowed him near infinite control over the Nova Force, which gave him the ability to use energy projection and absorption. So in all, not too shabby. Unfortunately, Richard Rider would eventually die during the events of the Thanos Imperative. In our number 3 spot, Beast. Beast, aka Hank McCoy, was part of the first iteration of Secret Avengers that began in 2010. He is by far one of the most physically intimidating team members thanks to his mutation. But Beast is definitely not just brawn. His character is known for his superior genius level intellect, being a brilliant, well-educated individual with a witty sense of humor and a reliable authority on biochemistry and genetics. His mutation gives him an animal-esque physiology, enhancing his physical attributes along with giving him sharp claws and teeth. He also employs a unique acrobatic fighting style when in battle. He can jump great distances, and his feet are sensitive enough to detect electronic signals, the likes of listening devices or bombs. Although Hank would depart from the Secret Avengers in issue 37, much like some of his other teammates. Up next, number 2, Valkyrie. Another OG member at this number. If we were looking at just the original team members of the Secret Avengers, Valkyrie, aka Brunhild, would have topped our list altogether. And as Guardian hero, she initially was selected by Odin to lead his personal unit of shield maidens, and became known for her prowess in battle. Her powers are based off of her Asgardian physiology. Her body is several times denser than humans, and while she is an immortal, she ages at a much slower rate than we do. Plus, she's immune to earthly diseases. She has enhanced strength and stamina, and is one of the most skilled warriors of the 9 realms, having extensive training in sword fighting, unarmed combat, and horseback riding, with her natural fighting abilities amongst the best of all Asgardians. She has an enchanted sword called Dragon Fang that was carved from a tooth of an extra-dimensional dragon. She can also perceive the approach of death thanks to something called a death glow, an aura of sorts that surrounds a person's body that reveals to her their death is imminent. Valkyrie would eventually depart from the Secret Avengers, also in issue 37 along with Beast. And finally, last but not least, in at 1, the Hulk. The Hulk became a member of the Secret Avengers following the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline in the Marvel Comics, along with the fight against the Descendants. S.H.I.E.L.D. took control of the Secret Avengers operations, which involved adding new recruits to the team like Mockingbird, Taskmaster, and Hulk himself. They're considered to be the Marvel Now recruits. Anywho, it's pretty obvious why Hulk tops this list. The angrier the Hulk gets, the stronger he gets, and the more invulnerable he is. His anger empowerment ability makes him one of the most powerful and straight up strongest individuals in the Marvel Universe in the comics, and it's rare we encounter an individual capable of withstanding his attacks and outmatching his endurance and stamina. He can even survive nuclear attacks and is proven to outlast most other Earth-based heroes, as seen in a handful of alternate timeline stories in the multiverse. And unlike the rest, the Hulk didn't officially depart the Secret Avengers team, but the last time he was present in the comics as one of their members was in Volume 2 of the series in issue 15.
So number 10, we've got Scarlet Witch. Now, okay, yes, I know some of you guys out there in the real world, you're gonna defend her and you're gonna say, hey, I know her powers, it's great, that's fantastic. So, let's get a little bit of a backstory here. So the first time we saw her was in 1964 in X-Men number 4. She had many appearances in comics over the years, and actually, when she first appeared, her first real big problem was that she didn't have really defined powers. That's right. Her powers initially were called hex powers, and she could just basically do anything and could cause random events to just happen. She pretty much was a wild card for any tough plot points that the writers had. So some things that she would do is, cause Ultron to short circuit randomly and even cause gas mains to just explode, and it wasn't until Kirk Busiek decided that her powers would be all about manipulating chaos. That's when we got a better picture. But however, that didn't really sit well, because by the time we got to the Avengers Disassembled series, she pretty much had the ability to warp reality. However, most people identify her as having chaos magic being used to her advantage. What is chaos magic? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Number 9, we got Miss Marvel, or Carol Danvers, appearing in 1968. Now, in the past, she has had so many problems. As a matter of fact, today she still has a lot. As a matter of fact, most people identify her as Marvel's version of Superman. Pretty much the female version of that. She's got super strength, stamina, all that sort of stuff. She can fly. Being half human and half Kree gives her a bunch of different abilities, and when she could fly back in the day, the only way she could do it was through a belt device. She also could tap into the energy of a white hole, which is a reverse black hole, which, by the way, has never been identified by man at all in history. This allowed her to control things like gravity, heat, and many other aspects of different spectrums. This also allowed her to survive in the vacuum vacuum of space, and she can fly 6 times the speed of sound, and yes, she can explode energy out of her hands, fingertips, all that sort of stuff. And apparently she also has the ability of 7th sense. Number 8, you got Hercules. You know, kind of an old sort of guy, you know what I mean? Debuting in Avengers number 10, 1964. Now, he was originally simply a minion of Immortus, and he belongs to the Olympian species. Like most, just like Hercules himself, he's got super strength, speed, and stamina. Known to be the strongest of all the Olympians, he could actually apparently pick up a sequoia tree, smash it to bits. It's also originally believed that he even moved the island of Manhattan. However, that was a little too much for comic book writers, and they were pretty much like, nah, he was just bluffing, he was just saying, tune the talk, you know what I mean? It wasn't true at all. Ooh. On top of that, he can go 100 miles per hour and go toe to toe with Thor, and can withstand, you know, the impacts from bullets. He's kind of another Superman if you really think about it, but his mace itself is kind of like the mace version of Thor's hammer. Thing is, he's backed up by Olympian magic, so nothing like even diseases can hurt him. However, if Zeus takes away his powers, he's pretty much useless. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if Rogue touched him. Number 7, you got Black Knight, or Dane Whitman. Now, an older Avenger dating back to around 1967. He's actually the descendant of the original Black Knight comics. He gets his powers mainly from his magic sword. He became the Black Knight after he got his famous winged horse Aragorn. Now, he joined the Avengers to defeat Kang the Conqueror originally. You know, he didn't really have any superpowers to begin with. This all changed, however, after he bonded with his teammate Circe. This was after she was injured and his fellow Eternal named Icarus attempted to stabilize her by merging the two together. He's apparently a good swordsman and can hold up against Captain America, and he's a bit of a scientist, understands genetic engineering. His powers might not be a mystery, but he definitely is. Number 6, we got Vision. Okay, yeah, we've all seen him. We all know basically he is a robot. Some people identify him more or less as a human being, but is made out of, you know, synthetic materials. Okay. Now, what's different about him from the movies is in the comics, he's got a solar jewel on top which absorbs solar energy, which can actually also discharge energy at any time. He also can fire beams of microwaves and infrared radiation. Very helpful to know. On top of that, he can also become extremely massive. This is confusing because apparently he does this by harnessing the power from some unknown dimension. This also makes him change in density. Being an android means he has super strength and all the other great attributes that other heroes have. As of recent comics, he can also split himself into smaller parts and change shape, but that's good old-fashioned nanotechnology at its best. Number 5, we got Mantis, probably my least favorite hero that I've ever seen brought to the screen. She's been around since 1973, so you gotta give her some credit there. Her origin, though, is completely unknown. Literally, she talks about herself in third person, and she says this one came from a place she must not name. To reach a place no man must know. So I guess, you know, you don't really know where she's from. She also trained in martial arts. Boom, bam, that's good. And she apparently can even, or at least almost beat Captain America. Her biggest and strongest power is obviously using psychic empathy, which means she can feel other people's emotions, man. Basically, she's Deanna Troi from Star Trek. This allows her to figure out also a person's weak spot where she can immediately, boom, knock them out. She's apparently really strong, and with that, she's never ever, well, only once has she ever lost in a hand-to-hand combat situation. On top of that, she has the ability to meditate and heal herself. In some series, she can even sense the future. Number 4, we got Star Fox, and I'm not talking about the good Star Fox. I'm talking about this Star Fox from Marvel. Part of the Eternals group, he appeared first in 1973. Basically, he ages really slowly because he uses cosmic energy. This also makes him extremely hard to hurt because the energy protects him from falls and impacts and other things like that. However, bullets and knives can hurt him, and not just emotionally. However, Star Fox in some series has been able to manipulate gravity using psychokinesis. He also knows apparently 500 alien languages. But his most important power of all is he is capable of activating the pleasure area of enemies' brains, which pretty much helps them calm down so he can win the battle. So I guess you could say, sexiness is his power. Yeah. Number 3, we've got Moonlight, that appeared in Werewolf by Night number 32. That was hard to say. 1975. Mark Spector is his alter ego. He is human. He's got a lot of similarities between him and Batman. Started off as a boxer, a costumed hero. However, he got his superpowers after he visited an Egyptian moon god. And yes, that means he gets a certain amount of strength depending on the phase of the moon. Apparently, at one point he even lost his powers because he was disobedient. Yo, you bad Moonlight. You said and now you're done. I don't know what that means. It's also been said that Moonlight has multiple personalities which make him immune to psychic attacks. He also uses what is known as carbondanium armor, which yes, is not a real armor. This allows him to lock joints and so he can lift more. On top of that, he can jump out of his armor and use it to hold buildings from falling over, which he's done in the past, and then he's fought villains in his underwear. Oh yeah. Does not fly anywhere. He has the mooncopter, kind of like the bat plane. I don't know why Marvel has not got sued for that. Number 2, you got Novar, a rather new superhero debuting in the year 2000 for Marvel Boy number 1. Now he is part Kree, part cockroach. That's right. He's also a part of the Dark Avengers. Now because he is half Kree and he has insect DNA, he's got a lot of strength, agility, stamina, that sort of thing. Not as appealing as Spider-Man though. Nobody really wants to hang out with a cockroach. What his power is he can also control his neurological impulses, so he can remove himself from feeling any sort of pain. He can also suppress his emotions, which can hinder him from winning a battle. This is simply known as Whiterun, where he removes anything from his thoughts. So basically that cute girl that's in the red dress while he's fighting Thanos, that girl ain't getting hit on at all. Also, Novar's salvia can infect people. I mean, like, he's a bug. He can scale walls and get into small places because he's triple jointed. And yes, like a bug, he can digest almost anything, which can repair himself. And like most superheroes, he knows science pretty well, which for this guy, he helped develop interdimensional travel. I don't know how you do that. But number 1, probably the worst of them all, is 3D Man. Oh god. Debuted in 1977 and should have stayed there. Basically the story is Chuck Chandler was captured by the Skrull invaders and he got turned into a 2-dimensional being. However, his brother Hal ended up putting on these glasses and could see his brother, and if he concentrated hard enough, boom, Chuck materialized into a 3-dimensional weird being. Basically done obviously through the advancement of radiation, of course. But the thing is, apparently when Hal puts on the glasses, it renders him unconscious, and of course, 3D Man goes to fight the world. 3D Man also has superhero strength, and you know what? I'm just done. That has got to be the most ridiculous one of them all. That's the icing on the cake.